Welcome to Baseball Biz. I'm Mark Corbett, and today we have a very special edition. We get to speak to somebody who's had baseball as part of their life for quite some time now. Today we welcome Bobby Bass to the show. He's a successful real estate broker at the Bass Group Real Estate. He's also a restaurateur. All this taking place out there in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and Louisville, Kentucky. Bobby is also a lover of the game and has a history with the game, including being drafted by the Colorado Rockies during the early years of their franchise. Bobby is also a dad who shares his love of the game today with his family. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's so good to see you. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, brother, I appreciate having you here. Bobby and I met years ago when I was working at the Courier-Journal, and he was as well. I got to tell you, when I met Bobby, you know, first impressions are important, especially with you, when you're in a sales environment. But I immediately got a positive vibe from you, Bobby. I mean, you were friendly, you're approachable, you're engaging. And, you know, I just saw you as a person of character. And to me, that means a lot. You're the kind of guy basically you want to sit down and be able to share a story or two with. So I'm really glad you're able to be here with us and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, thank you very much. That's a well-appreciated compliment. I take that very seriously. So I'm grateful for that. And likewise, I'm glad we had that opportunity to work together, and we're reconnecting here again. So
Absolutely.
Thankful for that.
Kind of give me a bit of an introduction to yourself with baseball. By that, I mean, as a youngster, when's the first time somebody put a ball in your hand and said, here, pitch it, catch it?
Now, that's a great question. And as long as I can remember, we've been around the sport. You know, I had definitely some natural ability as a youngster, but what really kind of consumed the family was, I'm guesstimating 1983, 1984. Me and my mom are living alone in an apartment. She's watching some soap opera on WGN. And then all of a sudden, she sees this gentleman drinking beer in the stands with the fans with huge glasses. And he cracks her up. And she watches day 2 and day 3. And of course, that was Harry Caray. And so she fell in love with the Cubs. We had no baseball in our family at all. And then, you know, this was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So, you know, my grandparents helped raise me as well. So my grandmother would come over and she was like, well, what's that? Oh, it's baseball. And then she's like, oh, he's cute. And my grandmother had a crush on Mark Grace. So then it just kept rolling and rolling. And, you know, I got into playing and, you know, I just love the game. I mean, there's nothing, you know, you get frustrated definitely with parts of the game, and you get frustrated that you always want to do better, but it was always my first love. And, you know, kind of progressed from there. But if you were to ask me going back into the archive, you know, I naturally had a love for it. My dad, who raised me, stepdad, but I call him dad, when I was about 3, he was a baseball player. In fact, he gave up a college scholarship to marry my mother and be my father. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, that's another tearjerker for me. But yes, so, you know, he had a lot to do with that as well. Although I almost quit. We were on a team called the Cowpokes. We were in Oklahoma. And it was an obnoxious orange color and a silly logo. And I was so embarrassed to wear that darn jersey around. And I'll never forget that. I was like, I don't want to play anymore. I'm not wearing this anywhere. But thankfully, my mom didn't let me have my way at 4 years old, and I progressed in the game. But yeah, if you were to ask me where it started, it started, I think, with my dad's influence. And then my mom and grandmother falling in love with the Cubs. And who couldn't, all right? I mean, come on, let's go. Harry Caray, that's pretty essential to baseball.
I'd say so, man. I mean, the energy that Harry Caray brought to that, and he brought so much excitement. Yeah. I mean, even if you just had radio to listen to the game, that man's voice just was, we were talking about being engaging earlier. He definitely engaged his audience. He definitely captured them and brought them in. And I love it too, how you're talking about your mom and your grandma. They came in from maybe a slightly different perspective than your dad with you as well. But it did bring you guys all together with the Cubs.
Right.
And speaking of the Cubs, you're going to be checking these guys out here in a few weeks, aren't you?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I've been blessed enough to be able to continue that. You know, we you know, skipping a few steps, but we end up in California, and my dad would find out. Back then, the players would pretty much all stay in one hotel. Now they, I'm sure it's a variety of reasons. One of them, including the money they make, they can stay wherever they want. But at that time, they would pretty much all stay at the same hotel. So I still, to this day, need to get a really strong answer how my dad tracked that information. But we would go into Mesa, and I remember, you know, seeing Sammy Sosa and Popeye, Don Zimmer, and Paul Osemacher, and just all these different players. And get your autographs. And, spring training, as you know, is just a magical time for many reasons, as a fan, as a father, etc. So about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, when my son became age, we started to fly out to Mason. Of course, they've got a new facility, but they're still in the same area. So we'll be out there yet again. I don't know how the autographs are going to go this year. I doubt they want people touching pins and balls, but we'll be out there rooting for them anyway, and having a great time, as we always do in spring training.
Well, that's fantastic, man. And you're talking about being able to take your own family and your son out there and get him engaged. And it is a little different this year as far as being able to interact. But we talked just a few moments ago then about your interest in the game. So from a 3-year-old to actually getting further on in the game, where were you at? You were in California back when you first really started playing, was like with high school and such, or how did that evolve?
Yeah. I moved to California when I was about 10. So that would have been 1989. And weeks before the big Bay Bridge earthquake during the Giants and A's World Series. Oof. So that coming, because we're Oklahoma, Texas, and California. So coming from Texas, we were more worried about tornadoes. So that was a little bit different thing. So I started to play there, and things progressed. I always had pretty good size. I'm 6'5" now, but I was in high school 6'3", pretty slender. I think at the time, and I don't know how much the terminology's changed, there was a lot of ceiling capacity that they would say that they saw, and I threw the ball pretty hard. I was hitting 87, 89 at 15 years old, so I had a pretty good little arm. The earliest I can remember is about 14 or 15. The scouts would start to come to the games, and again, some of this, it has likely evolved to maybe some of this is still the same, but they would hand out they would track down the parents. So if they saw me and they liked me, they'd track down my parents, they'd give them a little playing card, and to me that was just like freaking gold. To have the major league at the time, the Expos and the Angels, and actually the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. I'll never forget that scout. They were the Devil Rays at that time. And who else? I think the Chicago Cubs, and they'd fill out these player profile cards. So you have to think, as a 15-year-old, I think everybody's viewpoint's a little different. Like, I always wanted to play at the highest level possible. And, every kid that really loves the game wants to be in the pros, but you don't really think about the steps to get there. So for that first step, we didn't really seek it out. It just kind of came to us. It was really a lot to consume in a very positive way for us. So, oh my goodness, wow, that's, we knew we were pretty good, and making some all-star teams, that's one thing. And, but, to actually get that is quite something different. So, we started to do that, and then they would invite us to these prospect showcase shows, and they give you a wood bat, which was freaking sweet. Now you can go get them at Dick's Sporting Goods, but back then, that was like, oh my gosh, that's that's only for the pros. So we get our little wood bats and play, and things went well. That was really eye opening for me, because I always knew I was good, but I never thought of myself as like, hey, I'm better than everybody else. That was just never my thing. And but when we got to really get out there and see some of the best in the Bay Area and compete and be at that level, it was like, hey, this could escalate a little bit. And that's kind of how that took place leading into the draft, and how that all took place. And it was definitely a special time.
I can't imagine. Actually, I can't imagine, but it sounds very, to be able to do it. So I'm glad you're sharing it with us. I've always been a little concerned about youngsters being brought into this and thinking, how can they be prepared for this? You and I were talking casually the other day, and I was thinking about Mickey Mantle, and I felt like, it's obviously decades ago, but I felt like in some ways he was like a babe in the woods. And I don't know how it was during your time, and I don't know how it is now. Were there any challenges as a youngster as you were, coming into this and getting drafted?
Yeah, absolutely. My problem is obviously very specific to me and probably to each player, but, I was probably so good at baseball because I had to have something. So without getting into all the details, and this being a freaking Titanic of a and length proportion of a talk here, I had a lot of issues. I really did. I had issues just from a myriad of things that had happened in my childhood. And baseball was my one constant. That's the one thing I could go and in some ways control. I knew I would enjoy it. Obviously I wouldn't enjoy the strikeouts or the pop-ups to the catchers were the worst in the world. There was always, that's something that I could depend on, that the game was always very good to me. I enjoyed it. And so I dove in maybe a little bit deeper than maybe some of I would notice my other friends would, just because that was my escape. Like, and unfortunately, as I got older, it became drinking, it became, it became drugs. It became a lot of poor decisions. And it was really alarming, Mark. When I look back, it's really kind of a tremendous story of what happened. I was 17 when I got drafted. I was one of the youngest players to get drafted in the country.
Wow.
I was still in high school. I should have been a grade above, but I was a grade below. So I got drafted. So we sat down with the scout and said, okay, what's our options here? And the decision was to not sign and to go to college and to get better. Well, I kind of came to a fork in the road. Like it was time to address these issues. I couldn't get away from them. I couldn't hide them under baseball, and they started to come out. So what that allowed me to do, I think, with baseball is once I kind of got that notoriety in the area, I was a little less hesitant to kind of hide the issues I was dealing with and just the heck with it. I was just really frustrated because I got to that level that we were all looking for. I got drafted and none of my problems went away. In fact, they got worse. And so that was really disheartening for me. And that's when I just started to really cut loose. And so fast forward, I go to this JUCO in the same city that my scout was in. And that was the game plan: get even better, get higher in the draft, get a better payday.
And that's junior college for some of those who may not know. JUCO, junior college.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, junior college. And I got so out of control, I gained like 30 pounds of nothing but beer and Jack in the Box, for those that are familiar with that franchise. And I got kicked off the team.
Oh, wow.
And so my mom and my dad were like, okay, we got a problem. We got to get you out of here. This is not adding up. And a series of things happened. And I kid you not, we went from California, and I'm guessing it was like 3 to 5 weeks later.
Yeah.
Our house sells. My dad gets a promotion right back to Texas, and we just get the heck out of there. That ended everything in California, and I never knew if I would ever play again. Long story short, for my personal journey, that's when I was at the end of the rope. Now I didn't even have baseball, and I'm like, okay, now I've got all these problems. Baseball didn't fix it. Now baseball could be gone. I was a freaking mess, Mark, emotionally, just in a horrible mess. And my grandfather, who was in Tulsa at the time, he's since passed, but he was and always will be my hero. He says, Bobby, he was a minister, and he says, Bobby, I think you really need to search this out for yourself. And if you've ever had a time, you need to try to find as best you can who Jesus is, because you're in quite a bit of a problem.
Right.
And of course, that's the last thing I wanted to hear. But I was so desperate and so heartbroken. I did. I went to his friend's church there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I walked in the church with an attitude, angry. Within 30 seconds, I was bawling like I've never cried before. And I just felt the presence, and I knew, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. And I surrendered myself right there to the Lord. And of course, there was we're in Dallas, so there's plenty of baseball there. So I went to college. Things started to, and that's a lot of the things, that's a decision, but it's not like you just instantaneously magically healed. You never have any problems again. But it was the start of the journey. So once I did that, I went to play in Dallas, and that's when the Rangers contacted my coach and said they were going to get drafted, and that was kind of where we were in Dallas and in Texas. I started, obviously I missed that part, but I played and was playing at a very high level. Played very well. In high school, I aforementioned, I threw the ball pretty darn hard. Well, when I was about 16, I tore my rotator cuff showing off because I didn't want to warm up, and there was a cute girl, and I wanted to show her how hard I could throw it, and threw it out. Imagine that, another quality decision. And then that same year, I was rounding first after a light rain, hit a ball down the line, slipped on the bag, broke my elbow. And then my senior year in high school, they found a tumor and had to cut my shoulder out and remove a bunch of muscle. So that's all in the right arm, all the arm I threw with. And so I remember, there was a doctor, you'll never play again. I remember telling my dad, that guy's a freaking idiot. He didn't know what he's talking about. I don't care what he says. This is not stopping me. And so, it's crazy. We were out hitting, and my dad was throwing me BP at the high school. And I said, let me switch left. And so I started hitting left, and I had a natural uppercut. And I just started hitting bombs. Like I always was a really good contact hitter from the right, but I didn't have that uppercut swing. So I was like, oh my gosh. And, of course, Dad's like, no, I'll quit jacking around, go to the left. And I started hitting home runs. He's like, okay, you can do it a little bit longer. And so then I'll never forget, I went and I met in my senior year, and actually to really put the chair on top. It's actually our, what's that? What's the big dance for seniors here?
The prom?
Yeah, prom. Thank you. Duh. So it's prom night. It's bases loaded. And I'm like, Coach, I've been working on my left. He's like, Bass, don't even think about it. Go right. Well, I didn't. I went left, and I ended up hitting a grand slam. And I'll never forget. I came back to the dugout. I'm on cloud 9. Grand slam, prom night. My friends are on me, and my coach benches me for the rest of the game. But I was like, I don't care. It was a good game, and I have a pretty good feeling it's going to be a good night. So I just took my game ball and went home. But yeah, I ended up having to switch to try to create a little bit more value for myself since I couldn't throw nearly the way I could. So I switched to first base and then switch hit, and that's kind of how I continued to compete at those levels.
Oh man, that's a heck of a story. I mean, taking all that on your right arm and just adapting, or actually surpassing, what you had going already. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was ugly. It was ugly. So I'm glad it was able to give me a few more bats in my career for sure.
Well, that's exciting, man. So, but the thing about it is, you were talking a moment ago about a little bit about your personal journey further on down the line,
Mm-hmm.
and
yeah.
That took you, you found the faith, you found something bigger than baseball. I mean, as much as you enjoyed the game, and, that took care of, I guess, maybe tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but kind of an emptiness. Yeah. It filled that emptiness.
Absolutely. And that's, for whatever reason, and I have an answer for it. I did ask that question in prayer years and years later with like, what was the point of me being so good in baseball and playing so long just to willfully give it up? And, Mark, I'm not, I heard it, just a very strong thought in my heart is, that's what kept you out of trouble. That's what kept you living. That's what kept you out of jail, kind of all those type things. So I have a very special relationship with baseball. I look back at my childhood and I shudder to think if I didn't put in those hours, if I wasn't working on my swing, if I wasn't throwing extra pitches, knowing the condition of my heart, what would I have gotten into?
Right.
And that's why I'm such a big advocate of sports. There's so many benefits of it, and even when I first moved up here and I decided to give up the game, I did private lessons, and this is before my kid. I worked with kids, and you start to realize like that may be the only thing all week that they enjoyed. When I got back into the game, it was completely different. It was like most kids did not play Little League, and you had to be on a travel ball team. And I got really frustrated with many of the coaches in their approach to the game. The game, for a lot of the kids, even some of the best players I saw, at least in this area, they didn't even enjoy the game anymore. They put on too much pressure, and they expected too much out of kids. That's one thing to show them that's the level you want to be in college or in pro. But these kids are 10, 12, 14 years old. They mentally can't handle that. And I'd also beg the fact that they physically can't handle some of these schedules. So to me, in a lot of cases, and I know there's wonderful coaches with a lot of wisdom, and I don't lump them in on this statement, but a lot of them, these guys are just making good money on some of these teams. And it just really frustrates me, because to me, it was such a loving, just a love for the game. And there's kids that still have that, I'm sure. Again, these are kind of blanket statements. But that was one of the things that as I coached and my son played, is I would not let him play on a travel team, because I knew what many of them were about, until I finally found he was much later. He was mad at me, but I didn't let him play until he was about 13, 14. But, they got these kids in travel teams at 8 years old, and they're driving 2 hours away. So I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's too much for kids, frankly, above the kids to the parents. I think it's a lot of stress on the parents, time commitment wise, financially wise. I'm going off a little bit of a tangent here, but personally, I have a problem with that. I don't think that that's needed. I think you can burn kids out physically and emotionally. I think the game is fine. So at the pace a lot of the pros, take it, and they take a lot of time off than most people realize. They still work at it, but I'm really cautious on my personal son, and I always caution parents. I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm saying use wisdom, think it through. Just because they're on this travel ball team does not mean they're getting drafted. Just because they, travel to 8 different states does not mean they're getting drafted. Let the kid love the game, and I assure you, if he plays well, he'll get found. They pay people good money to find him.
Exactly. I mean, the scouts are out there, and every now and then you're just like, where did this guy come from? But
Yeah.
there is such a pull. I mean, I feel very fortunate. There was like a community when I grew up in a small town. They had a baseball parade every year with all the different teams were there. You were in your
Yeah.
uniform, and you weren't going all across God's creation. I mean, we
Yeah.
had like 3 ball fields in the park at least. Maybe there's 4 now. I think back to it.
Yeah.
And so you always had something going on. Your investment was you had a sponsor who paid for your hat, your cap, and your jersey. You know,
Yeah.
and you got a glove and a bat. And if a kid didn't have that, somebody else would make sure that they did. And those
Yeah.
kind of things. I look at that. I think about the boys and girls clubs, and to me, that's just so important to think of. Well, instead, I'm making an investment in my child to be a pro. That,
Yeah.
that just doesn't stick with me. I think the expectations are too high. I think the pressure is too high. So I like the idea of community ball.
Yeah.
And forgive me for getting on my own soapbox here because I talk about it too much anyway.
No.
But when you look at minor league ball, I mean, we used to have 160 teams, okay? And think of
Yeah.
every one of those players that go in there, every one of them have passion, have drive, and they want to be on a major league team. And
Yeah.
that may never happen. I mean, we're down to 120 teams. And one of the reasons, or a couple of the criticisms that came from Manfred, one of them was the amount of driving time it took for some of these minor league teams to go from one place to another. And you're talking
Yeah.
about these teams where out of development or the traveling teams. And I'm thinking, if you're thinking of this as already a problem in minor league, why would you be even
Yeah.
thinking about doing that to a child?
Yeah. It's incredible. I mean, and I still haven't learned it all, but my son is he'll be 15 in May, so he's 14, and it's a business at the major league level. I get that, but now they've made it a business at the single digit age, 8, 10, 12.
Yeah.
And it's incredible, and everything from that to these darn bat restrictions to where you have to buy the kids bats. We're not buying $75 bats, mind you, Mark. We're buying $400, $500, $600 bats.
Jeez.
Oh, well, now that's not legal. So our new standards are you need this bat. I mean, it's just insane. Like I used the same bat for like 8 years, and it was made of like rubber and aluminum, and that was the only two. I mean, we had the rubber, the handle, the grip, and like everything in our life, just the way that they monetize so many things, it's just takes. I think the word I'm thinking of when you talk about your store and the community is just it takes the purity out of the game.
Thank you.
And that's what I think is missing is the purity of the game, the love, the joy of the game. And you're right, it takes a community. And I'm with you. My memories in Livermore, California, were very much that. We had the local auto dealer was our, we had the team pictures and all that fun stuff and parades and all-star games and home run derbies, little fun things we would do there. But now, like when I coached, half the players that are the best echelon, they don't come to any of those events because they have a travel ball game in Indianapolis. But they're not just missing those parades and those events, they're missing half the Little League season. So what's happening, and I can only speak to this area, like Little League is begging to get people to play because the medium to higher tier, they're all on travel ball teams thinking that's the only way I can get better.
Yeah.
And it's just a different dynamic. And it's just one that I'm just not a fan of. Like you said, I think the pressures, it just sends the wrong message, and it just sends, whatever we do, we try to do the best we can at it. So yes, of course, as a young player, if I'm really playing and put a lot of time into it, I don't just want to say I'm going to play a little bit and then I'm just going to quit and do nothing. But what I'm trying to teach my son, and the hard lesson I had to learn, is what if you change your mind? What if you get injured? What if it doesn't happen the way you want? I was so hyper focused on baseball, and that's all I knew. I remember when I decided to move up here to kind of pursue Bible study, and I gave up the game. Somebody asked me, "Well, what do you like to do?" And I remember this is the most stupid I've ever done. I was 19, 20 years old, Mark. I had no clue. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. So I tried computer science. So I tried architecture. I had no clue. I didn't know who I was. I mean, my whole identity was wrapped up in the game. And that's not the game's fault. That was just my issues and my approach to it. But what I'm trying to teach my son is, hey, we're going to go for it. I got your back. We're going to play. But if for whatever reason it doesn't work out that way, I could care less. Dude, you're my golfing buddy. You're my business partner when you grow up. I mean, we got so many other ways to make memories and to have a killer father-son relationship. Like I said, and that's why I try to tell him, like, Ashton, don't get me wrong. I want you to do the best you can. But I want you to know, I don't care if you're a major league player. I don't care if you get drafted. I don't care if you play high school baseball. I love you for who you are, and I want to have a relationship with you. I want you to do your best. I want you to learn certain things that the game will give you. But I don't want you to get to where I was and whatever level that is and not be able to go to the next level and just not know who you are and feel like you've been a failure of some sort, because that's not at all how it's supposed to be, and that's not how I want you to receive that. And I don't think that's just baseball specific. My little brother was a great football player. He played at Oklahoma State, went to NFL combine, and his career ended abruptly. And he had a similar thing, like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And be open, be flexible, pursue other things. It'll probably help, because I don't think it's good to be so wrapped up in just one sport.
I think you make a very good point there about one not being too wrapped up in one sport. I think you make some great points about it being family supported, as opposed to this expectation of making the draft and being Mike Trout, or whoever out there. And looking to your own personal experience, you had your dad, you had your mom, you had your grandma, you had your grandpa, when there was things that weren't there, helping to bring you back.
Yeah.
But to my observation is that your commitment and your dedication to whatever you put yourself into was going to help you succeed in other parts of your life. And, while that's not actually saying, well, I'm going to take the same kind of pressure and do that. I think there's a sense of purpose. I think that went above and beyond baseball for you. And it's obviously something, you're communicating with your own family. That's something I think we all hope to do. I hope I've done that with my children. I feel like my wife and I have had very good fortune with that. I'm glad they've been able to participate with sports. Some of them was more of a social thing or whatever, but it did help them prepare, if nothing else, for social interaction with people.
Yeah.
And I look at people like you, Bobby, and a big part of your career and a big part of your success has been how you interact with people. So you tell me if I'm wrong. What do you see baseball? Do you see all the people that you wound up interacting as part of building your own career?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, absolutely. And that's, one of the many benefits of the game. You're right. I mean, you have to learn, obviously pressure and perform. I pitched a lot. You have to learn that. You have to learn communication. Definitely when we talk about this next generation coming up, I hear a lot of stories with friends that have kids, like I can't get them outside, or they don't like to talk to people. They just text, or they make little videos, and there's there's really not a lot of purpose behind the activities they're doing. So I'm very fortunate to where my son has always loved to go out and play. That's what I like about the game. At that level, it allows them to navigate situations at their level. They don't need to be worrying about the freaking election at 10 years old.
Right.
But what they can worry about is, hey, my buddy made an error. I can learn. I can get mad at him. And I can judge him. Or I can say, well, man, we all make mistakes.
There you go.
And don't worry about it. I got you on the next one. Or, and I need to learn accountability. Or guess what? They beat the fire out of us and they're being super obnoxious about it. So I can, get mad back at them, or I can just humble myself and say, what a bunch of losers, and move on. You know what I mean? So those are all like good kid problems that kids get to deal with. Or, I struck out. I can cry about it, or I can be so determined the next one I'm hitting a bomb, or, so on and so forth. Or I missed, more relevantly to my life, I was jacking around and I missed the steal sign, and now I got to deal with the coach coming at me. So it's just, I just think there's so many things that you're right that translate into real world experience that I don't even see a lot of people at my age. It's like they didn't get it. It's amazing how people react, talk. Who cares if we disagree? Well, why does that give any one of us a right to go yelling and throwing temper tantrums and calling people names and saying, okay, well, you're do you believe this or don't believe this? And you must be this. It's just stupid. It's like a really bad
come on
scene at a kindergarten playground, in my opinion. That's what our world looks like in a lot of ways. The most missing tangent is communication.
You know what? You've got a perception with this. You've got a life achieved with this.
Sure.
I want to salute you too, dude, because having the perspective, in raising your own children and giving them a sense of purpose above and beyond the game, but still be able to enjoy the game. You talk about not shouting and screaming. The only time I do that is at the screen of the television when Kevin Cash pulls Blake Snell in the 6th inning of the World Series. But
I don't think you're alone in that frustration.
But outside of that, the game should be fun, man. If you can't have fun with the game, if the family can't have fun with the game, then shame on us all.
That's right.
By the way, I saw that your Cubbies beat the Dodgers in spring training. I think it was yesterday. I think it was 7-0 or something like that.
I know.
I love spring training. Oh gosh, Bobby. Oh man, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, it's fun to talk a little smack, but in reality, I know it's spring training. And
yeah, it's spring training. That's what you could say about any of this. It's a great time. There's not enough of it on the air for me right now, but I love seeing all these new guys come up. I don't care if I can see a pitcher pitch one inning to see, well, I've never seen this guy before. What will I see him during the regular season? So it's exciting time. I'm glad you and your son are getting a chance to get out there and see some of it in Arizona here in a few weeks. That's fantastic, dude. Bobby, I mean, you've done so much. I'm glad to see what you guys have done with the community and yourself with coaching and all that. But you've established a couple of great businesses as well. Could you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, absolutely. Primarily, we started off with real estate. We do residential and honestly, mostly commercial now, but we really didn't plan on it, but we ended up getting in the food and beverage industry. So we've got about 6 or 7 different concepts under the Southern Hospitality Management Company. So we have Mesa Collaborative Kitchen, Mesa Kids Cooking School, 1816 Modern Kitchen and Drink, Bistro on Chestnut, Fresco Tea Bar, and Union Restaurant and Game Yard. And that's all I'm doing, Mark. You need to come back up here and buy these from me, and let's switch places.
I tell you, next time I'm coming up, I'm definitely going to take advantage of going to some of those places. Oh my gosh. Well, that sounds fantastic, Bobby. Sounds like you got your hands full, but congratulations on all that you're doing and your family. Enjoy the rest of the season. And are there any parting thoughts that you'd like to leave us with today?
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on, and thank you for being an ambassador for the game. My cousin, who I'm going to tell, he's a diehard Rays fan, so he'll greatly enjoy your stories and probably want to connect with you. And I have to say, he's been one since the beginning. So, yeah, I'm glad baseball's coming back. I think it's, as they'd say, American is apple pie, and hopefully it'll be a wonderful season. Everybody will be safe and have a wonderful year. Good times.
Well, Bobby, again, thank you guys enough. And again, that's Bobby Bass from Bass Real Estate Group. Also, he said some of the restaurants he spoke of earlier, make sure you go to them. And you can find me, Mark Corbett, at The Baseball Biz on Twitter. Also, you can find us on podcasts on Apple iTunes, podcast.google, Stitcher, Spotify. We're everywhere. So hopefully look forward to talking with you guys real soon. And again, thank you, Bobby Bass. Have a wonderful day, buddy.
You too, my friend. Take care.
So thanks again for joining us today in this special edition of Baseball Biz, and we look forward to talking with you again real soon. Special thanks to X-Take RUX for the music Rocking Forward.